Welcome to Awakening Mindfulness at Work, a conversation that matters. I'm Pierre
And I'm Sarah Killeen. We are bringing to you conversations and practices to cultivate presence, calm, and balance in the workplace. Great. Hi, Pierre. Good morning. I'm
Hello.
delighted to be here for yet another episode. I think the topic I've picked for today is one that we've been talking about very informally for a long time, and that might resonate with quite a few listeners. So I'm glad to be finally bringing this to the podcast. So, very often in our workshops and our classes, we talk about how we can change our relationship to our circumstances, right? Especially in the workplace. And the topic I'd like to talk about today is the situation that some of you might, recognize. Let's say you are in a current work environment that is making you miserable, or you are finding yourself miserable in that current work environment, or the current work circumstances are really difficult, right? Maybe it's the nature of the work, maybe it's the environment, maybe it's the dynamics, maybe there's difficult people, there's difficult tasks, there's a lot of overwhelm or stress, and you cannot change these at the moment. So right now you've looked at it very objectively, you've considered a lot of different alternatives, and for all kinds of reasons you cannot change these. So you have to stay in that environment, you have to stay in that function, you have to stay in that team, you have to have those conversations, those interactions, and do that job and get those tasks done or deal with these people in those environments. So how to deal with that? How can you stay, how can you still show up, how can you do what you are committed to doing, and still be well, so still take care of your mental health, physical health, and understand understand how not to get to the end of the day feeling completely drained and exhausted and powerless and helpless. So that's the topic I'd like us to talk about today. So maybe I'll just say a few things that came to mind for myself, came to my mind, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts, Pierre. But something that I've seen worked really well for people is becoming very gentle as well with the way they are looking at what they can and cannot control at work, and asking questions. So starting reflecting on how they can resource outside of work as a first, right? If there's something we can't change in the workplace, if there are people, tasks, dynamics that are taking so much of our energy, how can we resource outside of work? And how can you, how exactly can you resource, and making sure that becomes a non-negotiable. Otherwise, the cup will become completely empty really fast. So that's the first thing that I think we could talk about. I have a lot more points there, but I would love to hear what you're thinking about the topic and that first point.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. This is such an important topic, and yeah, if we are in those circumstances, it can really be hard to manage and work through them. So exploring this topic is crucial, and I hope we'll do a good first exploration today, and then we bring it back again because it's so multifaceted. So yeah, what you mentioned about resourcing, I think this is really an important pillar in helping us manage. And I would like actually to ask you a little bit more, because we hear the word resourcing, and sometimes it may be a little bit, it could mean different things to different people. So I'm going to ask you maybe a little later to tell us a little bit more from your perspective what resourcing is. But what I want to add to that, what came up for me is that there is this feeling that things are difficult and that we're kind of stuck in that difficult situation. um, this is something that we need to go back to examining again and again and again, because difficulty is not fixed. So sometimes we we experience difficulties and we think this is it, things are difficult, things are difficult, things are difficult, and we keep repeating that message to ourselves. That that can to, it can get to the point where it robs us the opportunity of looking at some of the things that may still be satisfying, or that may still bring us some energy, because we're so into focusing on the difficult part. So I guess what I'm trying to say is things are not like either or, like either things are very difficult or they're easy and good and positive. So could it be that having that mindset of, let me revisit this and let me check in, what is difficult? Is it all difficult? Is it sometimes difficult? Is there some hope in certain parts of my work where I can find some joy? Are there some relationships at work that can help me find good support? Yeah, so that's kind of what came up first, is just that questioning. How much of this um, might be a mindset that I keep repeating to myself and therefore amplifying how difficult things are.
I really appreciate that you brought that point up. I think that we've talked about it before. There's a lot that happens unconsciously, that also influences how we feel and what we think. So definitely when things feel difficult, whether they are or not objectively, will influence how we'll feel about them in the future. And we need to get more intimate with our fears as well. And, whatever beliefs we might be telling ourselves, so that we don't, like you're saying, get stuck in it. And otherwise it becomes a state sometimes, right? It just becomes our state. So I really appreciate you pointing that out. And I think that's something, that's an analysis, that's a little bit of an examination, right? An exploration that can happen in parallel with the other things that we mentioned, and that we can talk a little bit more about right now. When we talk about resourcing, um, doing a little bit of an energy audit is a way that I like to call it. Looking at your days, especially in the workplace, and asking yourself, what is working and what is not working. So starting with that, what seems to be working and what seems not to be working. And then thinking about it from an energy perspective, what gives you more energy and what drains you. And you can even rank it, right? On a scale from 1 to 10, how much are those activities, tasks, interactions giving you energy, inspiring you, or draining you and leaving you really exhausted? So doing a little bit of ranking, doing that exploration, and then asking yourself, how can you do a little bit more of what inspires you and what gives you energy, and do maybe a little bit less of what drains you? And of course, you might have limitations. Not everything is, up to you, especially if you are working within, a corporate environment, you are working within a team. But just trying to push the boundaries of what's possible. Because very often we realize that if that's an intention we set, we find some way to do even a tiny little bit more and a tiny little bit less. And that might look like, choosing, maybe if it's something that's really difficult, that is really impacting us, that
Mhm.
is really draining us. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to do it at all anymore, if we're actually supposed to do it as part of our job. But maybe taking a step back emotionally, and telling ourselves different things about that activity, so that it doesn't leave such a mark on ourselves. So that's what I would think about when I think about resourcing as well. So that's about resourcing within work, right? How can you do a little bit more of what actually gives you energy? How can you do a little bit less of what completely drains you? And then the most important part is how can you resource outside of work if work is the place where you feel stuck. So what I mean by resourcing can include a lot of different practices, of course, and it's different. Everyone has their own way of resourcing. For some people it's movement, moving your body. For some people it's connecting with nature, so being outside really gladdens the mind and gladdens the heart. And actually that's a question you could be asking yourself, as a synonym, instead of asking how can I resource myself, as how could I gladden my mind and gladden my heart. Is it hobbies? Can I find joy in activities that I really enjoy? Maybe it's crafts, whatever I really enjoy doing in my free time. And can I find joy in my relationships? Can I find meaning, in different endeavors that I have in life? Can I find joy in nature? And really trying to remember that bigger picture, that there is more to life than work, even though we are feeling very identified with work and we really care about work. Work might just be just a small part of our lives, and it's something we tend to forget when we are stuck in it, right? um so asking those questions, right? How can I gladden my mind and gladden my heart? If your body could vote on your daily schedule, what would it say no to straight away? If your body could say, there's one thing in your day that in this day that I don't want to be doing anymore. Maybe it's sitting for 8 hours straight in front of the computer. And what would he want you to throw out of your schedule if that's possible? So just looking at it from a different, on different planes. So the body, the mind, the heart, how can you bring a little bit more um, joy, restfulness? How can you restore yourself? And I have a few more practices there, but I want to let you comment on that because I know you have things to
Mhm,
say.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think something you mentioned that that's worth kind of reiterating and kind of making it really stick is intention and action. Like setting the intention that I'm gonna explore this instead of, I'm stuck. So setting the intention that I'm gonna be an explorer and see where I can take this, how I can what's within my reach, and how can I experiment and try things out. So this intention is a huge kind of mindset change, perspective change that will already, just having that intention already puts us in a different mindset. And then the action and the small incremental action. I think sometimes, we kind of think we need to take big action, we need to make big steps to really get some results. And actually small incremental actions can really be the start, and that can also put us on that track of being proactive and wanting to do something. One more thing I want to mention is focus, which is, let's say we have a difficult person at work. We can be so focused on that person, on that difficulty, and it can occupy us. It can occupy our mind, and it can become the thing. Or we can, with intention, try to shift our focus to something else. We don't have to be always reminding ourselves about the difficulty, and start to build more and more on top of it. Can we shift focus to the current task, to another relationship we have at work, to the bigger purpose of our work? So shifting focus, we don't have to be so focused on whatever difficulty that is. We can, and this reminds me, and then I want to hear more from you about what you wanted to expand on. This reminds me about a small meditation practice, and actually it was by Oren J. Sofer, one of our favorite teachers. And part of the meditation is, close your eyes, kind of imagine or feel your body, and realize that nobody right now is threatening you. Your body and where you are right now, wherever you are, you're probably okay. And the space around you is probably fine and you're probably safe. So kind of bringing that to mind and not getting that thought, not being so focused on that thought that there's somebody difficult out there. So kind of going back to, okay, right now in this moment I'm okay, and starting with this
Mm.
right now.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing the little practice. Obviously, there are people out there that are working in environments that are not safe. So can't say that this
Mhm.
would fit, everyone. But you're right. It's building that safety somatically is really important. What you just described. It's this. Um, it's very linked to resourcing, actually, right? It's building that safety within, so we can relax. And in that sense, taking action sometimes looks like stillness. I think that's an important one to mention. Taking action might look like stepping back and doing nothing for just a little bit. It might look like a contemplative awareness practice where you just notice and notice the beauty around you. Maybe you can pair that with gratitude to try, like you said, to help yourself shift and change channel and focus on something that will that will somehow help rather than drag you further down, right? So yes, action sometimes looks like stillness. I think it's an important one to remember. And I think something we haven't talked about yet is advocating for what you need as well. So that might not be possible in every situation, or you might need to set realistic expectations for that. But if you have done that analysis, you have done that exploration, you have uncovered what works and doesn't work for you, what you need more of and what you need less of, can you advocate for what you need? It might be with a manager if there is a difficulty there in that relationship. It might be with someone externally. There might be a different situation, but can you voice what you need? And that is something that tends to be very difficult for people. It is actually a practice, right? Communicating our needs. First of all, being aware of our needs is the first practice, right? And then how to communicate them and advocate for what we need is something that might work and might not work, as in it might lead to an outcome and it might not, but just the action of doing it can shift something already for us. Because like you were saying, we are taking action and we are going towards a version of the current circumstances that we might be happier with. So that was my last point that I want to talk about, this
Yeah,
advocating
yeah,
for our needs, and then accept as much as possible what is completely outside of our control. So when we've done absolutely
yeah,
everything we could to advocate for our needs, when we've done everything we could, there's an element there of learning how to let go of what we can't control, and that is also extremely difficult. Um, but there's no regrets there, right?
yeah,
If we've,
yeah.
we've done everything we could. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think what I'd like to kind of extract from this is it's so easy, especially if you are currently in this situation. It's so easy to say, well, I tried this, I tried that, and nothing worked. I'm stuck. Um, so the invitation here is to really work on this specific mindset, the mindset that I'm stuck, and to move into the mindset of I am a resourceful person.
Mm,
I have the ability to step into a whole different world of exploring the possibilities. And the possibilities include all of the things we mentioned today and many more. So just the invitation just to step into this exploration and action.
mm,
So that is the biggest hurdle, is that
mm.
move. So that's what we encourage you to do.
And if you don't feel like a resourceful person at all right now, maybe, asking the question, what would a resourceful person do? And that might look like someone that you admire. It might be a role model. It might be someone that you can temporarily, try to be. That really works. That sometimes it's a way to shortcut, the limitations we set on ourselves when it comes to who we are. So thinking about what someone that is so resourceful would do, or our future most resourceful state would do. Helps us just get a little bit, just lift the foot outside of that unresourced state we might feel we are in. So yes, I think we've covered a lot. um, Maybe we just wrap up with also mentioning that we are sharing a lot of tips in that podcast. We're sharing a lot of practices and maybe mindset shifts that we have seen work. And we don't want to minimize how difficult these can be, especially if it's a situation that has been going on for a long time. These can really, really just change our physiognomy. They can have such an impact again on our bodies, our minds, our heart, that some of those practices might be really difficult and really uncomfortable at first. So, like you were saying, Pierre, starting small, starting with intentions, and seeing what works, what doesn't, and take it from there. What would be your last words?
Intention and action.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pierre.
Thank you, Sarah.